Have you ever imagined this? On your wedding day, your own parents don't just not show up. They use the emergency credit card you gave them to fly first class to Rome during your ceremony. Here's the truth most people won't admit. Not everyone who raised you will stand by you when it matters. Sometimes the people you bend over backwards to make proud will quietly leave you behind. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because I had to rebuild my life from that silence. And I want you to know you can too. In this video, you'll hear how I turned betrayal into boundaries and how I built a life no longer defined by who didn't show up. You'll also learn how to protect your finances from family misuse without losing your heart in the process. They drained over $10,000 from accounts I managed for them. They never said sorry. But instead of fighting back in rage, I launched a financial literacy program for young women who've been through the same. And here's the thing, if you've ever wondered, can I still create joy even without my family's support? This story is for you. Don't skip it. Because what you'll hear next isn't just a story, it's a roadmap to starting over, stronger. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way, I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. I didn't see the betrayal coming. Not while I was tying little ivory ribbons to place cards or mapping out where Uncle Frank should sit so he wouldn't argue with Cousin Linda. Not while I was booking spa days and excursions for Cheryl and David, my parents, because I wanted their first trip to Maui to be unforgettable. I wasn't watching for warning signs because I was too busy trying to make them proud. It was tulip season in Des Moines, the warm kind of spring that lets you leave the door open without a sweater. Ethan and I had been living in his grandparents' old house for 2 years. Low ceilings, creaky floors, a front porch that made you feel like time slowed down when you sat there. Ethan taught 3rd grade. He made scrambled eggs every Sunday, and he always knew when I was pushing too hard, even when I pretended I wasn't. "That's a lot to spend on people who say so little," he said one morning, nodding toward my laptop screen. I was finalizing travel arrangements, first-class flights to Maui for Cheryl and David, with a surprise 10-day extension to Rome after the wedding. It was my gift to them. "They never ask for anything," I said, not looking up. "And it's my wedding. I want them to have this. I want them to remember it." Ethan didn't push. He rarely did. That was part of what made him good for me. When I overplanned, he reminded me to breathe. When I reached for perfection, he handed me perspective. But even he couldn't undo what was already set in motion. I remember Cheryl's voice on the phone that same afternoon. "I just can't wait to get away. Finally, a real break." She sounded more excited about the vacation than the wedding, but I didn't care. I held on to the joy in her voice like it was proof that I was doing something right. I mailed the itinerary in a soft cream envelope tied with a silk ribbon. Inside, I tucked a handwritten note. "Thank you for raising me. I want you to have this memory, too." I spritzed it with the perfume Cheryl used to wear, green tea and white flowers. Then I slipped in 2 Rome guidebooks. One had a sticky note on page 34, "Sunset dinner at Terrazza Borromini. Table for 2 reserved under your name." I walked the envelope to the post office myself. The air smelled like lilacs and wet earth. I felt proud, finally tangibly proud. That night, I lit a vanilla candle in the kitchen. It used to be Cheryl's favorite. But last Thanksgiving, she wrinkled her nose and said, "That scent gives me a headache now." So I snuffed it out and replaced it with unscented. I started noticing those shifts more, the way her calls grew shorter, the way she stopped asking about the dress fittings or the guest list. I brushed it off. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe she didn't know how to express joy the way I did. Samantha, my sister, still hadn't RSVP'd. She hadn't replied to the group chat either. No surprise. Samantha lived life like it was a road trip with no GPS, always detouring, always late. Cheryl defended her absence. "She's just busy," she'd say, or "she'll come around." But Samantha always came around when it was convenient, never when it counted. Aunt June called from Colorado. She couldn't travel because of her hip surgery, but she wanted to hear every detail. I told her about the flower arrangements, peach ranunculus and eucalyptus. I told her about the band. She listened quietly, then said, "Sweetheart, don't spend your joy on people who treat it like spare change." I laughed, but later, her words stuck in my chest like a splinter. Still, I kept planning. By Sunday, the envelope had been marked as delivered. I waited for a call, maybe tears, maybe laughter. What I got instead was a text. "Got the envelope. Thanks. Mom." That was it. No punctuation beyond the period. No question about Rome. No note of excitement. Not even an exclamation mark. I stared at my phone for a long time, rereading those 6 words, and I realized the candle in the kitchen had burned all the way down to the wick without me noticing. That night, I sat beside Ethan on the porch, the warm breeze carrying the scent of the tulips he planted. He didn't ask why I was quiet. He just reached for my hand. And I thought, maybe you don't get a second chance to make a family proud, but maybe you get one to stop trying. The first RSVP to come back wasn't from my parents. It was from my cousin Leslie. Her plus one, Samantha. I still hear Ethan's gentle warning. "Don't overthink things, Olivia. They'll show up," he said that morning. But silence has a way of shouting louder than reassurance. It was late spring 2023. In Des Moines, the days felt endless. Neighbors' lawnmowers hummed under bright sun, and the air smelled faintly of cut grass and charcoal from backyard grills. I was splitting my time between dialing spreadsheets at work and wedding dress fittings downtown. But no matter how busy I got, I couldn't shake the empty feeling when I checked my inbox for another text from Cheryl and David. I wasn't worried about the cousins or coworkers. I was worried about my own parents. By afternoon, I had already called Cheryl twice. The first time, her voicemail picked up after 3 rings. I left a detailed message. "Mom, fittings are next Tuesday at Cadence Bridal. We have appointments at 2 and 4. Please let me know which time works." I pressed send, then stared at the phone, willing it to ring back. When it didn't, my stomach clenched. Instead, I opened Instagram. A story from Samantha appeared. A shaky video of white sand and turquoise water, zooming in on tan beach sandals. At the corner of the frame, pinned to a corkboard, was a Rome airfare printout with dates highlighted, October 20th through 30th. Exactly the same weekend as my wedding. My breath caught. I tapped the screen repeatedly, zooming in until the dates blurred into script. First-class flights, 10 days in Rome, charged to my backup credit card, one I had given them for emergencies, never expecting them to use it for a personal getaway. I closed Instagram, fought tears, and headed downstairs to find Ethan studying lesson plans at the kitchen table. He was balancing his coffee mug in one hand and grading quizzes with the other. I tried to appear calm when I walked in. "Lunch?" I offered, gesturing to the peanut butter sandwiches I'd hastily assembled. He looked up, concern in his eyes. "How's everything?" His voice was steady, warm. I took the seat across from him, set my hands on the table. "I haven't heard from my parents about RSVPing." My hands trembled as I handed him my phone. "Look at this." He glanced at the screen, then back at me. "Rome?" he asked softly. I nodded. "They're supposed to be at the Memorial Day barbecue tomorrow, but they already booked flights to Italy." My voice cracked on the last word. He put down his pen and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "We'll figure it out," he said. "You're not alone." At that moment, relief and fear collided. Relief that I'd shared the truth, fear that it was only the beginning. That evening, I walked over to my friend Leslie's house, wearing my navy dress that had been altered to fit just right. Through the screen door, I heard laughter and music. I knocked. Leslie swung it open, a look of genuine surprise on her face. "Olivia, you look lovely." She stepped aside to hug me. I followed her through the living room to a small backyard patio where a few cousins were gathered. Samantha sat on a wooden bench, scrolling on her phone. I approached slowly. "Hey, Sam," I said, voice measured. She glanced up, gave a quick smile and a wave, then eyes flicked back to her phone. On the patio table was a registry box, already half filled with congratulatory cards from family and friends. I set my card inside, smoothened my skirt. "I just wanted to see if you decided on the RSVP," I said quietly. Samantha looked at me, mouth tight. "I'm sorry, we've had some things to figure out." She tapped her screen. One eyebrow arched. I glanced at Leslie. She shrugged, murmured, "Here's to family drama," before turning away. That night, I returned home to an empty house. I tried to work on flower colors, but fingers shook as I scrolled email yet again. Nothing from Cheryl, nothing from David. Then a ping. A forwarded invoice from Mom's longtime travel agent. Rome. The same dates. First class. Hotel under Dad's name. Entire charge on my backup card. $3,600. I sank onto the couch, staring at the invoice. The lamp beside me cast a pool of yellow light across the page, making the figure look brighter, almost mocking. The hum of crickets outside my window sounded like a question, echoing through my chest. I dialed Cheryl's number, held the phone to my ear, feeling hollow. It rang once, twice. Then her voice. "Hello? Mom, are you in Des Moines?" My voice trembled. I saw the Rome itinerary. "Oh," she paused. "Timing's complicated. You know how things are with your dad's health. Thought he needed a break." I closed my eyes. "While I'm getting married?" Her voice grew tight. "It's not that simple." I let the silence stretch between us. Finally, I said, "Okay, thanks for letting me know." I hung up and stared at the black screen. Ethan was waiting in the living room, one knee propped on the coffee table, hands folded. He didn't need to ask. I simply shook my head, words lodged in my throat. Later, we sat at Maple Street Bakery in a corner booth, 2 slices of chocolate raspberry cake between us. I brought my fork up to my lips, eyes distant. He fought a smile as he reached across. "Maybe we can postpone cake?" I managed a small chuckle. Baby steps. We both gazed at the waxed paper wrappers and begun to eat in silence, his presence a steady comfort, even as I felt myself unravel. I realized it wasn't just my parents who were absent. It was their support, the idea that they were standing behind me. That night, I texted Samantha, "We need to talk." She read it immediately, but never replied. I lay in bed, watching the ceiling fan oscillate. My phone buzzed with a reminder. Hair trial appointment in 3 days. I tapped dismiss, then rolled onto my side, curling into Ethan's waiting arms. The only thing louder than electromagnetic silence was the knowledge that my parents were choosing a European vacation over my wedding, and it felt like my heartbeat, too, had stopped. I stared at the screen so long, the button blurred. Freeze account. I didn't click it out of rage. I clicked it out of grief. Summer in Iowa carried that thick, golden heat that made everything feel slower, except my heart. I was supposed to be on PTO, supposed to be picking up my dress at Cadence Bridal, sipping lemonade with my maid of honor, maybe choosing earrings. Instead, I was sitting cross-legged on our couch at 3:47 a.m., laptop screen glaring into the dark, my fingers scrolling through every single transaction. It started with the Rome charges, but it didn't stop there. I logged into the retirement account I once helped manage for Cheryl and David, the one I set up when Dad had his surgery 4 years ago. Back then, I was the responsible one. They handed over financial tasks like a family heirloom, praising my spreadsheets and calling me the safe pair of hands. But on that humid summer night, my hands shook. There were multiple withdrawals over the past 2 weeks, one for $2,500 to an airline, one for $1,700 to a boutique hotel in Rome, another, smaller, for $870 to something called Eternal Journeys, Inc., a travel concierge. All totaled, nearly $9,800 gone. I hadn't approved a single one. I clicked into the credit card statement next. My backup card, the one I never used except for emergencies, showed charges linked to Rome as well. Spa bookings, prepaid tours, even a shopping spree at an Italian leather shop marked in euros. They hadn't even tried to hide it. I opened my inbox, heart pounding, and typed a message to Pauline, the family accountant. I kept it short. Hi, Pauline. Quick question. Do you know if power of attorney is still active on Cheryl's side? I thought it expired after Dad's recovery. She replied 5 minutes later. Hi, Olivia. Yes, it's still active. Cheryl renewed it during the refinancing last year. Let me know if you need help revoking. I closed my eyes. They used the legal permission I gave them. Permission I trusted would only be used for medical emergencies to fund a European vacation they never told me about. During my wedding. With my money. I called the bank. The rep was neutral, calm. Her voice didn't waver as she confirmed, Yes, Ms. Grant, you're still a co-signer. The joint account is active under both names. You have full rights to suspend activity. I didn't make a move that day, or the day after. Instead, I sat in the quiet of our home and listened to every echo of their silence, to every missed voicemail, to the sound of my own disappointment hardening. Ethan found me 2 mornings later, just after 4. I hadn't slept. My laptop cast a dull blue glow across my face. He didn't ask questions, just sat beside me and wrapped a throw blanket over both our shoulders. Then he looked at the screen. They didn't even tell me, I said, my voice barely audible. They used everything I built, quietly, like I wouldn't notice. He didn't try to soften it. That's because they knew what they were doing. There's a kind of betrayal that doesn't shout. It seeps. It spreads like fog, filling every memory with doubt. I remembered Cheryl's voice so clearly. We trust you with our money. I used to carry those words like a badge. Now they felt like a leash. That morning, I opened the bank dashboard again. My finger hovered. The button blinked back. Freeze all activity. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. I clicked. No alarms. No dramatic sound effect. Just a confirmation message. Access suspended, funds locked, cards deactivated. That afternoon, I sat on the porch with Ethan. He poured me iced tea. We didn't talk much. A butterfly danced near the rose bush, and I watched it thinking of how fragile flight is. You need both wings to lift off, and mine had been pulled in opposite directions for too long. I didn't cry. I didn't tell Aunt June. I just watched the sky change color and let the stillness say everything for me. The next morning, my phone rang. I stared at the caller ID. Cheryl. I hadn't heard her voice in weeks. I answered. She didn't say hello, just launched right in, voice sharp and shaking. Olivia, what did you do? I took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, I didn't explain myself. I didn't apologize. I just listened. Because sometimes the silence after betrayal doesn't need to be filled. Sometimes it just needs to be heard. I wasn't supposed to see it, but Samantha forgot to switch off the Bluetooth speaker, and her voice, laughing, came through the walls. When I was little, my mom used to whisper, "Some truths are better left unheard." Now that warning felt like prophecy. It was late summer 2023. The fields around Des Moines were golden with ripening corn. I parked in front of my parents' house, an aging bungalow with chipped white paint and a sagging front porch. Ethan tucked a hand over his eyes against the bright afternoon sun as he shut off the car. "I'll wait here," he said quietly, slipping behind the steering wheel. "Let me know when you're ready." I nodded, my stomach twisting. I hadn't slept well in days, worried that this reconciliation dinner was another excuse to gaslight me again. But maybe they truly wanted to talk calmly. That's what Cheryl had said. "We need to straighten this out," she texted. I took a deep breath and walked toward the front door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of burnt toast and stale coffee. 2 signs a morning meal had been neglected. Cheryl offered me a cup of tea, but she wouldn't look me in the eye. I set the travel mug on a mismatched coaster by an armchair with a threadbare cushion. David hovered nearby, staring out the window at the small vegetable garden he used to tend. He cleared his throat. "It's been quite the season for tomatoes," he said, as if that conversation would feel normal. I sipped my tea, trying to ignore the unrest twisting in my chest. The house felt too quiet, like a stage set for something I wasn't allowed to see yet. Then I heard it. Laughter. Soft and mocking, coming from the Bluetooth speaker in the living room, which I knew was paired to Samantha's phone. Someone said my name, and then another voice, shrill, almost triumphant, snapped, "She froze the account like she's some kind of hero." But let's be honest. Without us, Olivia would still be nobody. She's a glorified admin with a wedding complex. I froze, gripping the mug so tight that my knuckles went white. The words hung in the air like acid. My tea went cold in my hand. "Sam?" I called, my voice small. Nothing changed. They kept laughing. No one came to turn off the speaker. I set the mug gently on the coffee table and took a step toward the open doorway. Cheryl watched me, a strange expression in her eyes, half apology, half annoyance. David didn't move. He stirred his coffee slowly, as if waiting for a different cue. I climbed the narrow staircase to the second floor, where Samantha's bedroom door lay slightly ajar. Through the crack, I saw her friend on a video call, lounging on a beanbag chair. Samantha stood by the window, backlit by late afternoon sun, scrolling on her phone. I closed the door behind me quietly and slid my back along the wood until I was sitting on the floor. I pressed my forehead to the cool door, trying to calm my racing heart. This can't be real, I thought, but the laughter echoed in my ears. When I turned and shuffled back down, Samantha and her friend were long gone. No apology, no explanation. Cheryl remained seated on the couch, staring at the teacup she never finished. David lifted his mug as if toasting an absent guest. I fought back tears and forced myself to speak in a steady voice. "I heard everything just now. Glorified admin with a wedding complex." Cheryl looked away, blinking. "That's harsh. Samantha gets carried away." I stood up and steadied myself. "But you didn't stop her." She blinked again, as if confused. "I didn't hear anything." The speaker was off. David glanced between us, mouth tight. "Are you going to accuse your sister? Overheard bits and pieces don't make a full story." I felt my chest tighten. "That's exactly my point. You allow half-truths to stand. You've never given me a chance to explain." Cheryl took a shaky breath, leaned forward, and set her mug down. "You should know better than to assume—" I cut her off. "No, you should know better than to gaslight your daughter. You taught me to be responsible. But now I know that was just code for useful." Her face flickered, as if she wanted to argue. Instead, she said, "This is childish." I shook my head. "What's childish is pretending you want to fix things when you're laughing behind my back." David's eyes narrowed. "You're making a scene." "I'm not making a scene," I said, voice rising. "I'm letting you know I saw the scene you scripted, and I won't play along." Cheryl popped off the couch, spine rigid. "I hope you realize how selfish you're being." I held my ground. "I'm tired of being your spare change." I turned and walked out the door. Ethan opened the car door wordlessly. I sank into the seat and clutched my tea mug, no longer warm. "Are we okay?" he asked, voice gentle. I stared at my phone. The countdown app flashed 60 days. I didn't answer. And in that silence, I felt everything change. They didn't show up, but that didn't mean I had to disappear. For as long as I could remember, my mother's voice echoed in promises. I once asked her, maybe at age 7, if she'd come to my wedding someday. She laughed. "Of course. Who else would walk you down the aisle if your dad's late?" She said it so casually then, tossing the idea like a pebble into a lake. I never expected the ripple to come back this way. October in Maui brought a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in months. The air was warm, the breeze gentle, just strong enough to lift the corners of my veil. I stood barefoot in the sand, the ocean humming behind me, and let the salt kiss my lips while I waited. Inside the small bridal cottage, Aunt June clasped my hand and slid a thin silver bracelet onto my wrist. "This was your grandmother's," she said. "She would have wanted to be here." Her voice cracked only slightly. She wasn't one for dramatics, neither was I. But in that moment, I let myself feel it. Loss, love, lineage. Ethan waited beneath the canopy, palms swaying behind him. The setup was simple: wooden chairs, white linen, a circle of friends who flew across oceans to be here. I counted 12 people, not a grand number, but enough. Enough to prove I hadn't been left alone. The music began, a soft acoustic version of "Stand By Me." I walked down the makeshift aisle with sand between my toes, and June's hand squeezed around mine like a promise. No father, no mother, just me, and still whole. Ethan's eyes never left mine. When it was time for his vows, he unfolded a small, wrinkled sheet of paper, then looked up and tossed it into his pocket. "I wrote something," he said, "but it doesn't matter now. What I need to say is this. Thank you. Thank you for choosing love over legacy, for choosing us, not despite everything, but because of it." When it was my turn, I didn't read anything either. I spoke straight from the marrow. To those who showed up, thank you. To those who didn't, I forgive you. But that forgiveness isn't a door, it's a boundary. People say your wedding should be the happiest day of your life. Mine wasn't, but it was the most honest. Later, we danced under string lights, the kind that flicker like distant stars. Someone passed around coconut cake. Aunt June slipped off her heels and danced barefoot with one of Ethan's college friends. I caught Ethan watching me from the sidelines, smiling like I was the only person there. There was a moment, quiet and small, when I sat at the edge of the water, letting the tide lick the hem of my dress. Ethan walked over, crouched beside me, and tied the loose strap of my sandal without a word. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't need to. As the sun set, casting a path of gold over the water, I opened my phone. The wedding countdown app blinked back at me. 0 days. I stared at it for a while. Then I deleted it. Not out of regret, but out of peace. Later, in the quiet of the hotel room, I sank into the bed beside Ethan, still wearing my dress. The air smelled like salt and orchids. He was already asleep, hand resting on my knee. I picked up my phone once more. One new email. Subject line, "Important. Estate revision from Cheryl Grant." I didn't open it. Not yet, but I didn't delete it either. Some endings come quiet, but this didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the middle of something new. The morning of the ceremony, I woke before the sun. I stepped out onto the balcony of our suite, wrapped in the hotel's soft robe, and watched the waves roll in like they'd been doing long before I arrived, and would continue long after I left. I made tea, even though my stomach was too tight to finish it. When Aunt June knocked, she had 2 things in her hand: a paper bag with cinnamon rolls from the cafe downstairs, and a note she said my grandmother had once written on the back of a grocery list. "In case no one shows up," the note read, "dance anyway." "I think it's yours now," she whispered. There were no texts, no calls, not even a passive-aggressive group chat update. Cheryl, David, and Samantha had made their choice, and for the first time in months, I didn't try to guess why. Ethan helped zip up my dress. His fingers moved gently, reverently, like he was sealing something sacred. "You look like the future," he said softly. "Not theirs, yours." Even the officiant had teared up by the end. She told us afterward, "I've done over 200 weddings, but this one felt like a promise kept." Later that night, as I washed the sand from my feet and watched the moon hang low over the Pacific, I whispered into the night. Not a prayer, not a curse, just a release. "I did it," I said aloud, without them. And still, I was loved. And still, I was whole. At breakfast the next morning, the hotel staff brought us a complimentary tray, coffee, papaya slices, and a small card that read, "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Palmer." I turned the card over in my fingers, half expecting a scribbled note from someone else. There was none. But that quiet, that clean space, it felt like the right beginning. Not a blank page exactly, but one I could finally write on myself. I leaned into Ethan and whispered, "Let's never make someone feel like I did." He kissed my temple and said, "We won't." And I believed him. I didn't reply to her email. I didn't need to. My silence said what I'd been too afraid to say for 33 years. Winter came quietly to Des Moines. The snow wasn't heavy yet, just the kind that dusts rooftops like powdered sugar. I unpacked the last of our suitcases, ran my fingers along the bookshelf Ethan had reorganized while I was distracted by jet lag, and took a breath so deep it felt like it belonged to someone new. The email from Cheryl sat unread for weeks, but one afternoon, when the kettle began to whistle and the sky dimmed to lavender, I opened it. It wasn't long, a scanned copy of a handwritten letter of wishes, noting that they were removing me from their estate distribution. No legal standing, just a declaration, a final symbolic gesture. I turned the screen to Ethan. "They were never going to leave me peace," I said, shrugging. "I had to build it." He didn't say anything right away, just walked into the garage and returned with a surprise he'd been hiding since before the honeymoon, a doormat. Woven, simple, and stitched with a quiet declaration, "Welcome home, finally." I let my hands rest on the corners of it, pressing down as if I could anchor myself there. Not to the house or the land, but the life we'd chosen to shape here. Ethan squeezed my shoulder. "No more waiting," he said. "No more." Weeks later, I applied for a community grant. I'd been toying with the idea for months, ever since the financial betrayal unspooled everything I thought I knew. A literacy workshop designed for young women aging out of foster care. Budgeting, savings, reading the fine print, things no one taught us when we needed it most. The local center approved the pilot. Aunt June cried over the phone when I told her, "I knew you'd turn this into something better." "I had you as a blueprint," I said. "That's legacy enough for me." She sent me a birthday card the next week. Inside was a single line written in her slanted cursive. "Remember, peace is not passive. It's a practice." On the first day of the workshop, 10 girls showed up. Some were quiet, some joked loudly to mask their nerves, but all of them listened. Halfway through, a girl with tightly braided hair raised her hand. "Did your parents ever support your dreams?" she asked. The room quieted. "Eventually," I said. "I did." The girl nodded like she understood more than I'd said. Sometimes silence carries more weight than confession. Later that night, I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee. The screen door creaked gently in the breeze. This time, no one stormed out, and I wasn't waiting for anyone to return. I watched a car drive slowly past, headlights stretching across the snow-covered lawn. Not theirs, not anyone I knew. And for once, I didn't flinch. Some stories don't end with revenge. Some end with redirection. And mine had only just begun. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Ethan was still asleep, one arm flung over the blanket, breathing steady. I made a pot of coffee, poured it into 2 mismatched mugs, the ones we picked up at a yard sale last fall, and stepped out onto the porch. The sky was a cold shade of blue, like it hadn't decided whether to rain or snow. And for once, I didn't mind the uncertainty. I opened my laptop and drafted the flyer for the next workshop. Money doesn't define you, but knowing how to protect it can free you. Beneath the tagline, I added a quiet line in smaller print, led by someone who's been there. That was the part that mattered. I didn't check Cheryl's email again. I didn't block her. I didn't delete it. I just let it sit there, unread, unopened, untouched. Not out of malice, but because I no longer needed what was inside. That was the difference. One night, as Ethan and I folded laundry, he said, "You know, you never talk about what they said to you that day at the house." "I know," I replied. Do you want to? I paused, holding a soft towel in my hands. Not really, because that part isn't the story anymore. And he understood, because he always did. As February crept in with its long shadows and frost-bitten mornings, I found peace in the small rituals, putting out seed for the cardinals, making Sunday stew, sending thank you notes to the donors who believed in the workshop before it ever launched. Aunt June mailed me a second card, this time with a photo of her garden. "Weeds will try to grow again," she wrote, "but so will everything beautiful." I smiled, folded it, tucked it in my journal. It stayed there, between a grocery list and the first draft of my speech for the spring fundraiser. The porch was quiet that morning, just me, my coffee, and the sound of wind brushing against the screen door. It used to be where I waited for people to return, but now it's where I let myself stay. Sometimes, what we inherit isn't money or property. It's the strength to begin again on our own terms. And while forgiveness can be soft, it can also be solid, like a step taken forward without looking back. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear it. Leave a comment or share how you found peace in places you never expected. And if you believe in quiet strength, in stories that grow slowly but strike deep, subscribe to the channel because sometimes the most powerful journeys are the ones no one saw coming.